You know, I still remember it to this day. United was about to play against Bayern Munich in the 1999 Champions League final. With a lineup of Beckham, Giggs, Dwight York and Andy Cole, United was looking to bring home the Champions League trophy. The Champions League trophy that's been missing from the club since they last won it in the 60s. However, that Bayern team was no joke, and it became apparent rather quickly. A close-range free kick by Mario Basler gave Bayern a very early lead in the game. A shell-shocked United couldn't find a way back in the game, and at one point, Bayern even hit the post twice. It really wasn't happening for United, and the absences of Roy Keane and Paul Scholes were really felt by the team. In the last roll of dice, the great Sir Alex Ferguson brought on Teddy Sheringham and Gunnar Solskjær. There was a corner kick late in the game, and this was going to be United's last chance of scoring a goal. This was also the first time I ever saw a goalkeeper coming in for a corner, as even Peter Schmeichel came in for an all-or-nothing attempt at a goal. And guess what? United actually equalized. The game was back on, and the final was gonna go to the extra time. But the gods of football had other plans. Another corner kick, and Ole Gunnar Solskjær scored the winner. It was unbelievable. In a matter of 3 minutes, United overturned the game and their fortune. Even as a young Milan fan, I couldn't help but to admire that kind of a comeback where everything seemed lost. And there it was. Manchester United were the champions of Europe, but not only that, they even won the Premier League and the FA Cup. They were known as the Treble winners. The members of that squad have earned immortality in the hearts of millions of United fans. But the question is, what happened to them and where are they now? Well, stick around, because we're gonna go through these players. And I gotta warn you, not all of them have a spotless legacy. Obviously, a lot of time has passed since that miraculous night at Camp Nou. Hell, it's not even called Camp Nou these days. That's how long ago it was. But that's a different story. And members of that United team have gone through their own path after that treble season. I'm not gonna do the whole squad that played the whole season, because that's just way too many. But I think a good snapshot would be the squad that travels for that 99 final. I'm gonna focus on the 18 players that were on the field and the bench. And yes, I'm gonna include the suspended Roy Keane and Paul Scholes as well. I mean, come on. You can't just ignore those two. Anyway, let's start with the number 1 goalkeeper in that squad. That was Peter Schmeichel's last game in a United jersey. And what a way to end his United career. Captaining the team in the absence of Roy Keane and lifting the biggest trophy in club football in the miraculous way that United did. An absolute bargain buy for Sir Alex Ferguson. It's safe to say that Schmeichel's probably United's best ever goalkeeper to this day. That being said, his career didn't just stop there. He continued until the age of 39. After winning another title with Sporting Lisbon, he returned to the Premier League in 2001 with Aston Villa, where he actually scored a goal as a goalkeeper, and went on to end his playing days at United's not-so-noisy neighbours back then, Manchester City. By the way, things were a lot different for Manchester City back then, so it's not like he betrayed United by signing for City. Although Gary Neville took that pretty hard, I must say. These days, he works as a TV pundit for different companies. And speaking of Gary Neville, he was the right back in that final game. For the younger guys, they probably know him as one of the most well-known pundits who works for Sky Sports. But he was also a key figure in that United squad, both on and off the pitch, until his retirement in 2011 as a one-club man. After retirement, Neville was an assistant coach for Roy Hodgson's England, and somehow joined Valencia in a bizarre move that was, let's just say, head-scratching at the very least. That being said, this was a perfect opportunity to show the whole world what he's capable of as a manager. And yeah, that happened. It's safe to say that his managing career has ended before it barely began. It was a disastrous 4-month period for him and for Valencia. He's also the co-owner of Salford City, along with many of the players that will also feature on this video. Moving on to one of the best centre-backs of that era, Joop Stam spent 3 seasons at United, winning the title in each 3 of them before being sold to Lazio in 2001 in a move that Sir Alex Ferguson later regretted. During his time at Lazio, he was suspended for 5 months for using a banned substance. But other than that, he went on to have a brilliant career in Italy with Lazio and Milan before retiring at Ajax in 2007. Later on, he went into management, with Reading and Feyenoord among his clubs. Alongside Joop Stam that night was the Norwegian defender Ronny Johnsen, who was Stam's partner in crime for most of that season. He spent 6 years at United until 2002, before going on to play for Aston Villa and Newcastle, and retiring in his native Norway in 2008. Honestly, I actually don't know what he does these days. He's a hard man to find on the internet. But hey, If you guys know, let me know in the comment section below. I'm actually curious. Moving on to whom I would say is the most underrated member of that squad. Someone who, in my opinion, should be talked about more as one of the most consistent left backs of his era. Dennis Irwin goes down as one of Ferguson's greatest ever signings, and probably one of the biggest bargains in United's history for all the service that he provided for the club. He stayed at United until 2002 and ended his career at Wolves in 2004. After retirement, Dennis Irwin has worked for the club channel MUTV and is also a club ambassador. On an unusual right wing, we had Ryan Giggs, who normally played on the left side. The legacy of Ryan Giggs is a mixed one. On one side, you have a brilliant player with a legendary career who played over 900 times for United and won the Premier League 13 times, which is still a record to this day. On the other side, you have someone who's had affairs with his brother's wife. That's terrible, my friend, regardless of who you are. And he had to step down as the manager of Wales due to a court case against his girlfriend. After retiring in 2014, he became United's caretaker manager after United sacked David Moyes mid-season and went on to become the assistant to Louis van Gaal the season after. In 2018, Giggs became the manager of Wales, but officially stepped down in June 2022 because of the court case that I talked about earlier. He's also the co-owner of Salford City along with Gary Neville and a few other of his teammates that will also come up on this list. In the middle of the park, we had Nicky Butt, who came through the academy years earlier and had to fill in for the suspended captain Roy Keane. He stayed in United until 2004 when he transferred to Newcastle and went on to retire in Hong Kong in 2011. He later on returned to United in a variety of coaching roles, but left United after 9 years. He's also the co-owner of Salford City, and he won't be the last one on the list to do so. Also in the middle of the park, we have one of the most iconic footballers of all time. David Beckham needs no introduction. That night, he had to fill in for the suspended Paul Scholes in the middle, rather than his regular right side. He went on to win 3 more Premier League titles before moving to Real Madrid in summer 2003, where he won a La Liga in 2007. He went on to become one of the most iconic footballers to ever play in MLS, while at the same time moving to my beloved Milan for 2 separate loan spells before retiring in PSG in summer 2013. Even assisting in his final home game from a corner kick in a true David Beckham fashion. He's now the owner of MLS franchise Inter Miami. And oh, did I say he's also the co-owner of Salford City? Yep. On the left side of the wings, we had Jesper Blomqvist, who was signed as a competition and cover for Ryan Giggs. And because Giggs was playing on the right side in that final, he started as a left winger. And to be honest with you, I have no idea what happened to this guy after that final, so I had to Google it. And yeah, I guess injuries. Well, now you know. Due to a serious knee injury, he never played for the next 2 seasons and was eventually released by United. After retiring in 2010, he went on to open his own pizza restaurant near Stockholm. Up front was Dwight York, who was just signed that season, and despite the initial skepticism, he struck a lethal partnership with Andy Cole. He left United in 2002 and went on to play for Blackburn, Birmingham, Sydney, and Sunderland before retiring in 2009. He worked as a TV pundit, and at the time of making this video, is managing in the Australian League. Dwight York's partner in crime was Andy Cole that night, whose partnership helped United to the treble that season. Cole spent 6 years at United, and is still the 4th leading goalscorer in the Premier League history, despite not taking penalties. That's mad impressive, by the way. He joined Blackburn in 2001 and was reunited with his partner in crime, Dwight York, a year later. To be honest with you, the partnership wasn't really the same anymore. It kind of felt like a soup that was reheated in the microwave. He's had a few roles in coaching here and there, including working with Sol Campbell at Southend United. In 2015, he suffered a massive kidney failure, and his life was saved when his nephew donated a kidney to him. He's also openly talked about his mental battles and depression. From the bottom of our hearts, we wish you the best, Andy. Well, that was for the starting 11 that night. A starting 11 that was, quite frankly, struggling during the game. That was until the great Sir Alex made his 2 substitutions. First Teddy Sheringham, and then Gunnar Solskjær. Teddy Sheringham was signed to replace the retired legend Eric Cantona, and while he failed to replicate Eric Cantona at first, he went on to become a legend of his own right by scoring the first goal in that final. That being said, glory didn't just end there for him, as he won another 2 Premier League titles with United before returning to Tottenham in 2001. He's also played for Portsmouth, West Ham and Colchester before retiring at the age of 42. Yes, 42. But not only that, he even registered himself as a player when he was managing Stevenage at the age of 49 due to an injury crisis to his squad. I mean, he didn't play, but you know, that's mad. Meanwhile, your 25-year-old ass is still sitting on the couch. He went on to manage Stevenage in League 2 and ATK in India, and getting sacked by both clubs. The other golden sub was Gunnar Solskjær, who scored the winner at the end of that game. Ollie stayed at United until the end of his career in 2007, with United winning the league title that season. Honestly, that's not a bad way to finish your career, but his story with United was far from over. After managing United's reserve team until 2011, he went on to manage Molde and Cardiff, and getting relegated with the latter. Even then, no one thought that one day he'd be managing Manchester United in the same seat that the great Sir Alex sat for more than 2 decades. This was supposed to be a temporary solution until they find a manager in the summer. It was time for Ollie to shine, and shine he did. 10 wins and 13 matches, which also included the epic comeback against PSG, kinda tied United's hand into making him permanent. Legend has it that from this point, Ollie was seen at the wheel, but that initial optimism was soon replaced by a series of near misses and mixed results. And eventually, after a series of false hopes and near misses, Ollie was no longer seen at the wheel. Of course, in that 99 final, there were other people on the bench as well. And we start with the reserve goalkeeper Raymond van der Gaal, who played 8 games that season. He stayed at United until 2002 and went on to be a goalkeeper coach at Sunderland, Vitesse, and PSV Eindhoven after retirement. And oh yeah, he also occasionally puts us mere mortals to shame with his incredible physique at the age of 59. So once again, how old are you? Moving on to Wes Brown, who came through United's own academy, there was a lot of hope for this kid to be United's rock at the back. And he kinda was, but more as a right back. When United won the Champions League again in 2008, he stayed at United until 2011 and became a pundit after retiring in 2017. Moving on to David May, he played 9 games in that whole season, and none of it in the Champions League. To be honest, his biggest contribution in the Champions League was just a badass celebration photo, which I really rate by the way. Since retiring, he's become a wine importer, a presenter on MUTV, and the co-host of the official Manchester United podcast. Much like David May, Jonathan Greening was in and around the squad, and if it wasn't for the suspended Keane and Scholes, he probably wouldn't be on that bench for the final. That being said, he still went on to have a respectable career at Middlesbrough, West Bromwich Albion, and Fulham, and is the manager of Scarborough Athletic at the time of making this video. Moving on to the other Neville in the squad, Phil never really established himself as an undisputed starter. That being said, he was a valuable utility player throughout his United career, especially in that treble-winning season. He left United for Everton in 2005, where I would argue he played his best football. He came back to United as a part of David Moyes' coaching team, went on to manage England's women's team, and at the time of recording this video, is the manager of David Beckham's Inter Miami. He's also the co-owner of Salford City, you know, in case that matters. And now, moving on to my favorite United player of all time. I think Roy Keane's significance should be talked about more often. Matter of fact, I would argue he was the most important member of that squad. He was suspended for the final after being booked against Juventus in the same stadium where Paul Gascoigne shed tears. Instead, with a true captain's performance, he made sure that his teammates made it to the final. He was let go by United mid-season in 2005, following tensions between him and Sir Alex Ferguson. He ended up promoting Sunderland to the Premier League as a manager before having a brief spell at Ipswich Town. Later on, he became Martin O'Neill's assistant manager for Ireland, Aston Villa and Forest. These days, you'll see him as a pundit in Sky, often next to Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher. And I gotta say, he's actually one of my favorite pundits of all time. Paul Scholes was Keane's partner in crime in the middle of the park throughout that season. Another important player who missed out on the final due to a booking in the semi-finals. Unlike Roy Keane, Scholes would spend the rest of his career at United and lifted the Champions League trophy again in 2008. He retired in 2011, but came back from retirement in January 2012 before retiring again in 2013. This time for good. He was a manager at Oldham Athletic for a short while, but other than that, he's been a pundit. And I swear this is the last time I'm gonna say this, but he's also the co-owner of Salford City, along with the other 58 guys that I mentioned before. I feel like this graph can summarize what happened to that United squad after they all retired. And there you have it. I swear this was one of the most exhausting videos that I've made for this channel. I've always been curious about what happened to the guys I used to watch back in the day. This was the first time that I was making a Where Are They Now video. And I gotta say, by far my most challenging video to make. I'm used to focusing on one story at a time, rather than focusing on 20 mini stories within a single video. Let me know if you want more of these videos on an iconic player or teams from the past.